Hello, welcome to my videos for Advanced Google Docs. In these videos, I'll be walking you through some of the tips that I've laid out in this particular document. Hopefully they'll be helpful for you especially if you're trying to make the transition from using Microsoft Word to Google. So these videos are geared towards classroom teachers and creating worksheets for students, though obviously there are going to be other applications for the suggestions. And so even if you're not a classroom teacher, I do hope that you find them helpful and useful. These videos in particular are going to allow me to explain and demonstrate some of the tips that I've laid out in this document, but I won't be addressing everything. So I do hope that you take the time to look through this document on your own. And particularly the examples on the right, that I give you various points throughout. I'm not going to go through every single one of those. So, all right, so let's get started. This video is part one, where I'll be going over some of the basics when it comes to tables. As I say at the top, tip number one, tables are your best friend. This was a real game changer for me when I finally figured out how to create tables and manipulate them. And I realized they transformed how I created worksheets, especially when it comes to electronic worksheets. And so when I say electronic worksheet, I mean a worksheet that I create that I'm going to push out to students through Classroom, Google Classroom, or any other platform. But they're worksheets that I create specifically for students to complete on the computer. So part of the problem I ran into, and I'll just sort of demonstrate, give you an example on another document. One of the problems I ran into was when I would create worksheets the more traditional way, there wasn't really a clear place for students to type, and their answers were sort of blended in. So here's an example of a worksheet I created specifically to print out in hand to students, right? So it's more of a traditional worksheet where there's a question and then I leave space for students to write their answer in by hand, right? And this works perfectly fine if you're going to print it out. And like I said, this is a doc that I created for that purpose. So the question is here. There's nothing fancy at this point in this document. There's questions here, and the students have space to write their answer by hand. It would be obvious that their answer is different from the text, and it really, there's nothing wrong with that. But if I were to push this out to students electronically and they were to type their answer, I mean, this is what always bothered me. There would be, the formatting gets all mixed up, especially if they go to another line. Their answer doesn't really stand out. When it comes, it's right exactly the same color, same font as the it's the same color, same font as the question above it. So anyway, tables help me address that. So let me give you an example of a worksheet created specifically for completion on the computer. So I'm going back to my tips for Google Docs. This first example I gave you on the right, Imperialism in China background reading. I can't take full credit, obviously, for this document. I pulled the original off of New Visions. So if any of you are social studies teachers out there, New Visions is phenomenal and a wonderful resource, and I get a lot of stuff from them. But anyway, so they originally created this. I've done my own editing and formatting of the document afterwards. The real point here is this is just basic text that would be from a textbook. And then I ask some comprehension questions in the middle, just kind of for students to stop and check. Okay, so what have I done here? These are the questions that I'm asking the students to answer. I have made sure that they are bold. I colored the background of it because that really helps that stand out. And the place where they're going to type their answers is white. So it really kind of helps provide the contrast between what I'm asking you to do and where I want you to type the answer. And so now if they were to type their answer, it's going to stand out a little more. It's not going to blend in with the question above it. It makes it a lot more obvious for you or for them to go back and look at their work. The other thing I did was on the right, the question says identify 3 effects. And so to really emphasize that I wanted them to do 3 effects, I have 3 rows here. Okay. But by contrast, question 1, I'm just asking for a description. And so on this side, there aren't 3 rows. Okay. So I'm going to show you how, I'm just kind of show you how I do that. This is pretty easy, pretty basic. So first of all, to insert a table, you go up to Insert, and table. All right, you got a lot of options. You can select how many columns you want your table to have. You can select how many rows. You're not wedded to whatever you choose. Just so you know, you can always insert rows and delete rows and insert columns and delete columns afterwards. So it's not you're not committed whatever you choose. So for that previous one, if I'm going to recreate that previous table, it was a 2-column table with 4 rows. So that's what I'm going to select this time. Okay, so the top row is the question row. And so again, before I type anything, I'm just going to highlight them both. You can do any number of things at this point to really make it. You don't have to do it the exact way I did. Often what I will do is bold it, and I will go over here, and this is the little paint can, changes the background color. So you can choose, I usually stick to the lighter colors, or the lighter grays, or even sometimes if I'm feeling like I want color, I usually stick to this top row. I just feel like the text stands out a lot better on it. So I'm going to choose yellow. I'm feeling sunny today. Okay, so bold and yellow. And so for question 1, right, so describe, something like that, right, describe, blah, blah, blah. And then here, question 2 was list 3 effects. Okay, so there. Got that. Got your questions. It's really clear where students are going to type. Right. But like I said, I left 3 rows here because I'm looking for 3 particular separate answers. But on this side, I don't need that. And so what I'm going to do is merge the cells over here. So I'm just going to highlight these 3, okay, just in this area that I want to merge. And there are 2 ways to do this. You can go up to Format and go down to Table, and you have all your options there. And there's Merge right here. What I tend to prefer, though, is to just highlight. And then you can right-click. We're inside the highlighted part, and it gives you all those same options, right? So you've got your typical copy and paste options, as well as all these other formatting options. And so I'm going to select Merge Cells. And there you go. You've got a nice one big box for them to describe, and you've got a nice 3 rows where they're going to list their 3 separate their 3 separate answers. Okay, so going back to my advanced Google Docs document, you'll notice, hopefully, that I've sort of done the same thing on this doc itself. And that's not because I was purposely trying to demonstrate. It's more like this is honestly what I do when I create Google Docs. This is really just how I've found is best to format. So my 5 tips, right? I actually changed the font of these. I didn't just bold them. I changed the font. This is Times New Roman. This is Libre Baskerville. So I changed the font. I did put it in bold. I changed the background color. And actually for each of my 5 tips, I gave it a different background color. And I think it really helps it, you're not going to miss when I go from number 3 to number 4, even though they're on the same page, you're really not going to miss it. Change this color. It really, again, emphasizes that this is a separate section. So if you want to see, this whole document is a table. This whole sheet is a table. This is a 2 columns, right? Several rows, but two columns. I changed the width of the columns because I wanted the explanation side to have more room, and you do that simply by dragging this middle one, right? You can drag it. Oh, they're going to have a longer explanation. I'm going to give them more room and let them describe over here. So you can kind of manipulate it that way. The heading rows are merged cells, right? So these are merged, and if I decide, I didn't want that, you can always go back down and you right click and you can go to unmerge, and it unmerges the cells, but I don't want to do that, so I'm going to go back. Okay. So hopefully that gives you kind of a basic idea of what tables are and how they can be useful. I really do encourage you to look through some of the more advanced examples on the right. They get much more complex, but it also gives you a good sense of the kinds of things you could produce with various merging and adding columns and rows.